I went to Las Vegas for the first time about a week ago, and it was certainly an interesting experience. I had no idea how drab and boring most city centers are compared to Las Vegas. Um, I went there on kind of business, and I don't want to discuss that business on such a public forum. So if you're curious, you can ask me, and I'll tell you some details about it. But I went there for about a week. I stayed at hostels the whole time. I went to some amazing hot springs, and it was a nice time. I also met up with a friend who I've known on Facebook for a long time, who was part of the raw carnivore community, and it was really cool meeting her. I don't run into raw carnivore people all the time, and it's usually pretty inspiring because it reminds me of that there's people who are out there who are um, somewhat crazy in a similar way, and yeah, it's good to build community and uh, and hang out in that regard. Um, I did not do any gambling. I did not do any whoring. I did not. I did step foot in a casino, but it was just for a drink. If people want to do gambling and whoring, it's their business. Personally, gambling is gambling with money on such a small scale for me is not very interesting. I understand that yes, you can certainly win big, but I know how psychology works, and I know that I see it as some sort of lucrative career. I doubt I would be able to just win big the first time and just never touch it again. It's a slippery slope, so I've already been addicted to many things, including World of Warcraft and smoking weed for too long, smoking too much weed for too long, I should say. All things in moderation. Um, but I don't need another addiction right now that just sucks up all my money. I played around with the stock market maybe a year or two ago, and that was a little bit similar. It's also gambling, and I decided that I'd rather just invest in myself and my own health and my own businesses rather than give that money to another business just to have some fun for a few minutes. But I did drive down the strip up and down a few times. The first night it was just because I was just so bored, without my computer and no one to talk to, that I was like, I'll just go for a drive in a nice rental car and drive up and down the strip, see what it's all about. It was certainly an illuminating experience. I mean that in multiple ways. Everything is very bright and neon, and yeah, and it's very impressive visually. The first night I was a little bit judgmental, and I was like, oh god, all these people just like lost in this illusion that this is like the most exciting thing that you can do on a vacation. You just go into a bunch of casinos and buy a bunch of you know products but I tried to kind of let go of that judgmental attitude a bit. I realized they're just a bunch of people trying to channel their inner child and trying to have fun, ignore the stresses of the world for a few moments, and so it's all right. To each their own. I I do wish that Portland, for example, would kind of lean into that extravagant style a bit, because if you are going to embrace consumerism and globalization, you might as well make it look good. Um, Portland, downtown Portland is pretty boring compared to Las Vegas, and Um, if downtowns are committed to bringing tourists and all sorts of things like that, then you definitely want to rethink your marketing style. There could certainly be space for a little bit more bling, more snazzy kind of displays and things. I stayed the first night at this. I stayed at the Bungalows Hostel, which is on the North Las Vegas Boulevard. The location was really good overall, really close to a bunch of different places that I needed to go to. But the Bungalows Hostel is pretty it's pretty garbage. I don't recommend staying there unless you've got nowhere else to go. It was pretty cheap. It was only like $30 a night, but they allow locals, so it pretty much felt like a step up from a homeless shelter. I had a terrible night's sleep there because I was sharing the room. It was like a 6 bedroom or 8 bedroom shared dormitory. There was one other person sleeping. No, there was 2 other people there, and one of them was just snoring, like the loudest snorer I've ever heard in my life. I thought I could handle it. I couldn't. I went to Walgreens to buy earplugs at 10 at night. I came back, put them on, and I could still hear the snoring perfectly. It was like vibrating throughout the whole room, just unbearable. And so I actually slept in my car that night, and that was not great. But I had a meeting the next day, and I definitely wanted to get some sleep before that. And so the next day, I walked over 2 buildings to Sin City Hostel, and Sin City Hostel was a breath of fresh air. It's a really wonderful hostel as far as hostels go, pretty well organized. A little bit more expensive. It was like $50 a night, including parking. Um, but they don't allow locals. They make you show a boarding pass or a car rental receipt or something to make sure you're not from Las Vegas, which helps keep things a lot more um, respectable. Um, and there was a really fun crowd there. There was like an ex-military guy who talked about this, 3-letter agencies a bunch and dropped a bunch of interesting facts that he picked up along the way. There was like this guy who dressed like is an older guy in his 70s or something who dressed all in black leather, and apparently he used to be a manager of pit bosses at like the MGM Grand or one of those really big casinos back in the, I would say, 70s or 80s. And now he's doing merchandising for Albertsons. So poor guy was not too stoked about having to stay at a hostel, but it was interesting chatting with him. There was also a Serbian who was a volunteer at the hostel who didn't believe in free will, and that was pretty funny. If you don't believe in free will, it's kind of hard for me to prove that free will exists. It has to be kind of an internal realization, or like a cosmic revelation, perhaps. But I stayed really. I followed my diet really well. I went to Whole Foods and I picked up a few pounds of ground beef and my favorite blue cheese. I just kept it going. I kept up. I have one right here. So, yeah. And apparently I do make giant burgers. It wasn't just in my imagination. The Serbian was really shocked at how much meat I ate. He called it pure protein, but really it's the fat that's really important. The protein's a bonus, but if you don't eat fat with your protein, you're gonna get a rabbit. They call it rabbit starvation or something, where you don't get enough fat. So you definitely want to prioritize the fat if possible. Our brains are mostly fat, of course. I went to hot springs, and let me look up what they're called real fast. Hot springs near Death Valley, California. Oh yeah, they're called Tecopa Hot Springs. Tecopa. And that was really cool because I drove out there in the evening, and the sun was setting as I drove through across the Nevada-California border. And just as I got into Tecopa, the sun set, and it was, the magical hour where there's no sun, but there's still a little bit of light left. I asked a random person where the Mod Pond is, which is the only undeveloped hot spring left in that cluster. And then I found it. I had a really nice soak for a couple hours. The water was amazing. It apparently has a bunch of minerals, some of the highest mineral content in the world, including borax and magnesium. Boron and magnesium. And that was really amazing. The only issue was that from the moment I arrived to the moment I left, this group of guys was just talking nonstop about all sorts of stuff. Sometimes interesting, sometimes a bit, weird stuff. I didn't say a single word while I was there. I just felt like enjoying the silence, and there was some really good stargazing. You could see the glow from Las Vegas on the horizon. So I'm hoping to go back sometime soon. Probably around winter, because I like the cold when you get out. Apart from that, I just handled a lot of business, and yeah, Las Vegas is interesting. I don't know if I could live there, because it's a little bit too consumerist for my taste, but it'd be fun to own a business there. So I'm thinking that maybe if I ever, get around to starting a dance club, I'll have to have one in Vegas, because, that'll be the coolest place to have one besides Ibiza or something. So, yeah, Las Vegas. Kind of boring if you're not gambling or whoring, but still a good time if you know where to look, and if you have friends to show you around.